Hello everyone, welcome to No Credentials Required. This is brought to you by Belly Up Sports in association with Godzilla Media. Just want to remind you, please like, share, and subscribe. Whether you're on watching on the YouTube side or you're listening on the audio side, you can subscribe anywhere you find podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, Google Play, Podchaser, anywhere you're listening to podcasts. Please give us a like and review. We do appreciate it. And also want to remind you about the social media handles, which is right here below. Twitter at BellyUpNCR, Facebook, facebook.com/BellyUpNCR, and of course on YouTube side, No Credentials Required. I'm going to bring in my guest today. We're going to interview Evan Pivnick from the Adirondack Thunder. He's the broadcaster, so I'll bring him on in. Evan, how are we doing today, bud?
I'm great, Ryan. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Before I start asking you questions, I just want to ask you, how have you and your family been during the pandemic?
Been all right. I think obviously after our season ended, it's strange because our season is so hands-on and so busy that when we get the off season, it's like, okay, we could relax for a little bit. And that's kind of like the first thing that happened, where it's like, okay, we get a little bit extended off season because, right when our season ended, we kind of, I think before that, like the season was suspended for 2 weeks and then it got canceled. So we didn't really know how long, as anyone did, how long things would kind of last. So then kind of once the summer hit, then it's like, okay, we're going to start up right back in October again, as half our league did. But obviously being in the Northeast with the restrictions being a little more tight, we couldn't. So that's when everything was like, all right, well, we're going to have to wait until next October to start up, hopefully. But now, obviously, the light's at the end of the tunnel here. We're starting to plan already for next season. And I think that for sure makes everyone feel a lot better. The weather is nicer outside again. Yep. So I think the combination of all the things, definitely puts a smile back on my face.
All right, so we're going to start off with this big question. When you were growing up, was sports a big part of your life?
It was a gigantic part of my life. Sport. I apologize if you hear the sirens and stuff in the back. Yeah, no, I live right across from Glens Falls Hospital, so
there you go.
Couple times a day they come on by, hopefully saving the lives of the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's always people, first responders helping people, which is nice. But sports were a gigantic part of my life. Still, obviously, are. Growing up, I'm a huge Mets, Jets, and Islanders fan. I watched a little bit of basketball, but I couldn't take all of the losing. So, I kind of refrained from watching the Knicks a little bit. But I grew up 15 minutes away from Nassau Coliseum. My dad had season tickets to the Islanders when I was younger. Being able to go to see the Islanders play and being able to be home on a school night by 10 p.m. was, obviously great because I wouldn't get in trouble. And then my dad had season tickets to the Mets, still does have season tickets to the Mets. So, all year round there were sports, and I'd go to sporting events. I was lucky enough to do that as a kid, and then through my my young adult life, and I still get to go to sporting events for a living. But, growing up and being able to not only go to these events, but to watch on televisions and sports. I mean, my family, they're big on sports. So I was lucky to be raised in a very sports driven house.
It's nice to know you're a Jets fan. We'll get along really well. I'm a Jets fan myself. Baseball team. Yeah, I'm a Yankees fan. No big deal.
That's all right.
Also root for the Mets if the Yankees are out of it, but
that's all right.
Sports being a big part of your life. How did your interest in broadcasting grow?
So going back to my dad, he was the broadcaster for the Albany Colony A's and Yankees.
Oh my gosh. I remember the Yankees. Yeah.
Back in the mid 80s. He was there for the change of name from A's to Yankees.
Okay.
He went to school at SUNY Albany and then got that job out of college. So for me growing up, he got out of broadcasting just a few years after that, but he growing up for me, when I watched a game with my dad, it was more so listen to this broadcaster call a game rather than, look at Mike Piazza, the way he's playing, sort of a thing. It was more of a focus on the broadcast rather than the players. So, and, I played a little baseball growing up, wanted to play a little more, but obviously the skill level wasn't there. So what's the next best thing than, broadcasting the game? So I, as a kid, I'd play video games and I'd turn down the sliders so that there's no broadcaster. Apologies to Gary Thorne, who was doing the games, or Jim Houston.
Gary Thorne.
Yeah. So I turned that down, but I'd still have like the crowd and the music. So I would just call the games to myself. I probably, I would just sit there and do the games. And that's really how, it gets started for a lot of people. And as little as broadcasters know, when we're that age, that's experience, that's reps, that's doing stuff.
Yeah.
And,
so you're kind of an audio nerd like me. I would tape everything. I do like recordings for myself. You do the same thing, I suspect.
I sat in the upper deck with my friend, one of my best friend growing up, Tom, who's still one of my closest friends. And we would call the games to ourselves. Like we had a little voice recorder, and like he wasn't so much into broadcasting, but we were just big hockey fans, so we would do that. We'd sit, there's like 25% people at Nassau Coliseum watching the Islanders in the late 2000s when they weren't great. So we would watch the games and call it to ourselves. And like, obviously it was more joking. It wasn't really taking it seriously. Like, we would say some pretty funny things, but at least we thought it was funny. But that's really, and that's how it's what we did. And little did I know that would help me get experience to what I'm doing today.
What led you to take this job with the Thunder at Glens Falls? I suspect you grew up in the Albany area. My next question was, did you even know that the Glens Falls existed? But you seem like you grew up in the area. You kind of know already that Glens Falls existed.
So I'm from Long Island. Long Island. I knew it existed because my dad used to go to Adirondack Red Wings games.
Nice.
Back when he was going to school and stuff like that. So I always knew that, it existed. Mm-hmm. I've been to an Albany or an Adirondack Phantoms game. We went to a trip to Montreal, and on the way back, we hit up a Phantoms game. That was probably 2009. So I'm familiar with, the surrounding areas. And plus, my godfather is Paul Schwartz of the New York Post, who writes for the Giants. Okay. And a couple of times I went up to go see him in Albany at training camp and hang out with him for a few days. But I was familiar with the area, and I got the job in Glens Falls out of college. I went to Bowling Green State University, and it was strange. It's such an unpredictable industry, and the way it worked out was it's a pretty funny story, or at least I think it's funny. So when I graduated school, and I was looking for work, obviously, and I was going to be an intern with the Rockford Ice Hogs in the AHL. Just like a broadcast intern, and it was just something for me to do, that I'd stay in hockey. I wouldn't really be doing play-by-play, but it was a lot of stuff that I really haven't done before, like digital stuff and video stuff that I would probably need at some point in my career. So I was ready to do that, and that I was going to leave the last week of August to do that. And I saw right as I was like packing my car the week before that this job opened in Glens Falls, and it opened because the Vegas Golden Knights hired all their broadcasters, because that was their first year in the league.
Right.
So they hired Dan Duva, who was doing the Syracuse Crunch. So he goes from Syracuse to Vegas. That opens up the Syracuse job. And Lucas Favali, who got hired in Glens Falls for only 2 months because he was the voice of the Elmira Jackals, who folded.
I remember the Jackals.
Yep. They folded in 16-17. So he was going to be the broadcaster for the Thunder. So he got hired in like June. And then in August, he took the job in Syracuse because he went to school in Syracuse, and it was a great opportunity for him. So that opened the job in Glens Falls. So I think I interviewed on the phone Monday, and I thought it okay. Got a call back. So like, hey, can you drive up to Glens Falls? I was like, I have nothing to do. So I did. I drove up to Glens Falls and interviewed on Wednesday, and they said, hey, okay, we'll let you know by the end of the week. I said, perfect. But I didn't say like, okay, I'm leaving to drive to Rockford, Illinois on Friday, which is how it worked out. So my dad and I are driving Friday. All the stuff's in my car going up, and I didn't hear anything. So I was like, okay, I'll probably hear Monday. Or I'm assuming at this point it's a no because I didn't hear anything, which was fine. Like, it was my first, shot at interviewing for like a job I could possibly get. So for me, like, I was like, okay, I did the interview process. It's a learning experience for me. So Saturday, we spent the night in Bowling Green. I saw some buddies there. And then Saturday, I went to go see a friend in Chicago for lunch. So finished up lunch there. I was texting the guy to get my apartment keys. I was 40 minutes away from Rockford. And then I got a call from Jeff Mead, our team president here, saying that I got the job.
Nice.
So I basically told my dad, hey, let's pull over and figure everything out here. So we turned around at like a gas station outside of Chicago. I called my supervisor for the internship, Bob Mills, who's actually a graduate from Bowling Green. And I was like, hey, Bob. And this is like a day after like 2 other interns quit or didn't like the same thing. They got jobs. I was like, Bob, I hate to do this to you, but I got an ECHL job. And he was like, dude, don't even worry about it. That's awesome. Congratulations. You got a job. Like, go have fun with that. We'll take care of everything here. And that was like a weight off my shoulders. I was like, oh, this is my first time interning away from home, and I'm going to ruin it the day before I'm supposed to show up. But he was awesome about it. I was actually texting who would have been my roommate in Rockford. We were talking about like what cable like thing we were going to get. And then like my next text was like, yeah, I'm not coming. But that's how it worked out. It was, 3 days of driving 1,800 miles, and I'm in Glens Falls now.
Take the listener or the viewer through a typical game day. How do you prepare for games with the Thunder?
Do you want a home game or a road game?
Let's do both. Let's start with home.
Let's start with home. Okay. So in addition to broadcasting the games, so broadcasting is actually a very small percentage of the job that I actually do. Mm-hmm. And it's this way in minor league sports. I think in both hockey, baseball, pretty much anything you find. Yep. I'm also the director of communications, director of community relations. I do a lot of our marketing, our social media. So that's like my main job. Yep. So on a game day, let's just say we play at 7 p.m. So my mornings consist of printing. I will print probably until noon in terms of our game notes, our schedule, our like posters for that day with all the stats on it. Mm-hmm. And then I do an interview with a couple of players in the morning. So I have stuff for the intermissions. So as the players are practicing, I'll grab a couple of them and chat for about 10 minutes with each. So I just have something to air between periods.
Right.
And then I'll go back to the office. I'll print some more. I'll start stapling some stuff together. And then that's probably around 12. Then I'll go set up the press box around 12:15, 12:30. So I'll bring up all the stuff I printed out. I'll make sure everyone who has a spot at the press box has game notes, all the other game notes from the other team, because they have to send their versions of the game notes, the league stat pack that we have to print out, like the other notes that are going on, and just make sure everything's all set up for that game. That takes me about till 1 o'clock. And then from 1 to 3 is kind of like laying low. Maybe I'll grab some lunch, make sure I have everything set up basically,
Now, I hate to interrupt you. Do you do a pregame nap that the players do?
Not at home usually. Not at home. No, but so I'll make sure. And also like in the mornings, I'll give all the stat packs to the coaches and the players. I throw a couple in the home and road locker room. So I have to make sure I do that somewhat earlier in the morning so that I can catch them when they're there during morning skates. So, and I do our pregame. We call it the lowdown with Alex Lowe as our head coach. So we do that before the we do that before the games, or around the mornings around 10:30. We do that in our lobby. We do the video of it. So that's cool. Get that done. Just a lot of running around in the mornings. Things are printed out, and then from like 1 to 3, I'll grab some lunch, change into my suit, and then I get to the rink around 3:34, and that's really when it becomes like, okay, there's no fans in the building yet. We open doors at 5:30 for a 7 o'clock game. It's kind of just like make sure we have all the loose ends tied up. So we'll have like a production meeting at around 4:30 where everyone kind of gets their roles for the game. Who's going to handle this group that comes in? Do we have these elements for the scoreboard, for the video board? We know what we're doing. And we just have that all set, ready to go. And then 5:30-ish comes around. I'll go to our coach's room, interview him for right before the game, because obviously different mentality. So I like to get the pregame interview right before kind of everything begins there. Yep. And then 6:50, I'm on the air for our pregame show, and then 7 o'clock comes around, the game goes through. I do our press releases too, so I'm writing the game recaps in between periods. That's why I do the intermission interviews. So it gives me a little bit of time that I can write our game story, and then once the game ends, depending if we're on the road right after or not, I'll finish up the game story, send out some photos, and then send that to all of our contacts and make sure they have it, post everything on social media, and hopefully we're all set and there's no problems.
All right.
So that's a home game.
I suspect that a road game is a lot different. Take us through a road game, preparing for a road game.
Okay, so I'll preface it. Okay, let's just pretend that game just ended, the home game. So let's just say we're going to Maine to play that. So let's just say that was a Friday night at home, Saturdays at Maine. So I'll finish up my post game recap as quickly as I can. I'll head down to the locker room. I have a change of clothes waiting for me down there. I put on whatever tracksuit or sweatpants and sweatshirt that we're gonna wear on the bus. I have my pillow with me, and we get on the bus. And Maine is about 4.5 hours, so we have our post game meal down there too. So if we're traveling, we sign up for a post game meal, and it's usually I don't like to eat anything too greasy on the bus because then you feel gross the whole trip.
Yeah,
so I keep it somewhat simple. So we leave probably around 11:30 the latest, because guys you still have to shower and we have to pack up all the stuff. So we're on the bus probably 11:30. So we don't get into Maine till around probably 3:30, 4 in the morning. So I do all of our travel. So it's my responsibility to check in at the hotel, which they have the rooming list from the day before. Hopefully what is still intact from the rooming list, depending on what happened during the game, if anyone got banged up or something like that.
Right.
So we drop the guys off at the hotel. I make sure the hotel has all the keys and all the rooms situated. I make sure everyone's situated. Then myself, our equipment manager, athletic trainer, and our coaches will go back to the arena. This is probably 4 in the morning at this point. Unload all the bags for all the players. We hang up all the stuff in the stalls for the next morning's morning skate, or for that morning's morning skate. It's in 5 hours. So we put our gloves on. It smells terrible. We're on the bus for 5 hours, and then we're putting up all like disgusting gear. But it's like the little stuff that makes the world go around, I guess. And we do that. We finish that probably 4:30, 4:45, depending on how quickly you want to get out of there. So in bed, probably 5 a.m. Sleep for a few hours, grab some breakfast, head over to the arena. Take some videos maybe for morning skate to post on social media, do a couple interviews again, and then coordinate team lunch. So team lunch is always at the same time in the hotels. So I'm in charge of getting that all situated. So I'll go back to the hotel a little bit earlier, make sure that's ready by 12:15, and then make sure it's there until all the guys have eaten. And then when that's done, that's probably around 2:30. Then at that point, I'll see what office work I have to do, or just get ready for the game that night. And that I'll do pretty much in the hotel. I room with our equipment manager, Alex Mann, and we pretty much have forensic files on the whole time. So that's really, and then at around 4:30, 4:45, depending on where we are. If it's Maine, I'll walk to the arena around 4:30.
Now, for a longer road trip, because I know you guys go down south occasionally, to Norfolk, to Charleston, to Florida, back up to Cincinnati. Is it the same type of thing every single night?
Yeah, it's always nice though when we're in a place for more than one day. Right. Obviously, like a couple years ago, we got to go to Fort Myers, Florida for 6 days, which was like, it's never going to get any better. It's not going to get better than that in the ECHL. Because we were in one spot for 6 days. So we didn't have to worry about anything, in terms of travel, but the flights are, it's my responsibility too. So I have to make sure that those are all coordinated, but yeah. And for the most part, it's pretty much the same thing. If our schedule allows, we try to go the day before, if it's a place that's like maybe more than 4 hours, just so we can like settle in the afternoon, go out till dinner. Guys can kind of do what they want. And it's, not as time crunched. And a lot of the cities, luckily in our division, are awesome cities. Like Portland, Maine is just a great city. We get to go there a ton of times. So we always like to get there early so we can go out to dinner and go to all these nice places. So it's definitely different depending on the city you go to, but grand scheme of things, it's the same.
That was actually my next question about, in addition to being a broadcaster, you're also the travel coordinator for the team. Yeah. But if you say you were going to Newfoundland, because you got to go to Newfoundland.
Yeah, we do.
Described all the domestic stuff. What about international stuff? You have to deal with passports. You have to deal with visas, all that kind of thing.
So I'm a big advocate for our guys, or everyone, if we're traveling, no matter where we are, always have your passport on you.
Of course.
There have been instances where guys have gotten called up
Mhm.
and the team they're playing is in Canada, and they don't have their passport, so they can't go. So they have to call someone else. So it's like you always want to be ready to be called up at any point for the players. So I just said, if you're traveling, no matter where we go, just bring your passport, put it in your backpack, forget about it. Like it's the easiest thing you can do. And plus, when we went to Brampton, which is no longer in our league. They folded, unfortunately.
Oh.
But when we'd bus there, but in order for our guys to get their per diem, I would ask to show their passport. Like, let me see your passport. So this way I know you have it. And, if you lose it by the time that I ask for it and the time we get there, that's not my fault. That is on you, but that's going to slow everyone down. So I have to make sure everyone has their passports. But yeah, for Newfoundland, luckily, the way they run everything is great. They have people that basically just take care of a lot of the stuff for us. They have their own travel agency. They have their equipment stuff taken care of.
Thanks.
So I'll just email them and say, hey, we're coming on this day. And, we want to arrive at this time. So their travel agent will reach out to me and get all the people processed for it. And Air Canada, hockey sticks fly free, which is the most Canadian thing in the world. But it's nice. It saves us some cash.
It's the name for lacrosse sticks too, because lacrosse is the national sport of Canada.
Exactly, but I'm sure it's the same thing there too. But they know how often hockey teams travel through Air Canada. So but the logistics are a little bit different when we fly, or in the past when we flew to Newfoundland, because the planes are smaller, so we can't get a direct flight to Newfoundland.
Right.
But luckily we are close to Montreal.
Yep.
In a sense where we can just go that morning.
Yep.
So instead of flying from Albany, we fly from Montreal, which saves us the customs.
Yep.
So we cross the border normally on our bus, and then we fly out of Montreal, and we go Montreal to Toronto to St. John's. So that's kind of our way of going around, making it more of a tedious task, but it's still nerve-wracking because it's still flying, and there's a lot of things that are out of your control. Like last year, it was our last trip before our season was canceled. We were flying to St. John's. Everything was going so smoothly. Like I couldn't have written it better. Like we got to the airport at like 8 a.m. on a Monday, and there was no one there. Awesome. Which was like shocking because we have to check in 25 people plus bags. Like it's not an easy process.
No, it doesn't seem like it. No.
But luckily, like Air Canada, like in Montreal, they like you just say like, hey, we're the hockey team, and like, okay, perfect. They send like 4 people out to help us. But there are also instances where we go to different airports, and I'm like, well, you have to wait on this line. I'm like, I don't think you understand what we're doing here. But so everything was fine. Like we were going to be in time. Like we planned the trip so we can be in time for dinner. We had like a team like bonding thing that night. Like it was like we were all going to go out and go have dinner and stuff like that. And that would have put us probably 5 o'clock Newfoundland time, which Newfoundland is an hour and a half ahead of us, which is the weirdest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It's strange. So we no hiccups from Montreal to Toronto. Like no hiccups. Like the flight was immaculately on time. The boarding went smoothly. We had this huge plane taking us from Toronto to St. John's. It was like one of the jets that were going to go to Europe after.
Oh wow.
So it was like 3 seats, 4 seats, 3 seats, and we're all spread out. It was great. So it's probably 3.5 hours into the 4-hour flight to St. John's. The captain announces, hey, we're making our final descent into St. John's, just make sure you have all your belongings. 5 minutes later, he gets back on the thing, and he's like, so they don't have enough space for us to land in St. John's. So we're going back to Toronto.
Oh.
So I was like, what?
No.
Like, yeah, so we had and I think I took a picture of it somewhere on my phone of like, because on the seats they have like the screen, so it shows you like the map, and it's just like you see us in St. John's, and it's just like this figure 8, and it just comes back to Toronto. So it was like a 5.5 hour, 6-hour flight, and then we land in Toronto, and like all hell's breaking loose because at this point we don't have an equipment truck anymore because our bus left. They dropped us off at the hotel and left. So we're trying to figure out also hotels because they're going to put us up in a hotel, but also we're in the same boat as like 3 other flights, I guess. So I was waiting online in the Toronto airport, like wrapped around for like a mile and a half. I finally got to the front of it, finally got us rescheduled
Mm-hmm.
for the next day. I had to call like the emergency line for the travel agency. We got rescheduled the next day, but we were broken up on like 3 different flights. But we had to stay at the hotel. Like there's a hotel like shuttle, and then I was like, we can't get our equipment on the shuttle. It's just like a normal shuttle that like a rent-a-car place would pick up.
Right.
So we went down to baggage claim, and they took up all of our stuff off the plane, and we just asked the guys like, hey, we have no choice but to leave it here. Like we can't do anything else. We need to leave it here. And they said, okay, well, we can't guarantee, but we will do our best. Mm-hmm. So we ended up checking into this hotel. It was like a Holiday Inn or something. And I was just getting texts and calls from our player. It's like, Piver, there's 3 guys in one room, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I can't do anything right now, guys. Like, it's one night. We have to get up at 5 a.m. anyway. It's 1 a.m. Like, just lay on the floor. Like, as much as I would love to help you, I can't. It's out of my control. Mm-hmm. And like a couple of guys understood that. I was just getting texts like, there's 1 bed and there's 3 of us. I was like, I didn't plan this. So, So we end up getting to the airport the next morning. Yes, my first thing is like, okay, our bags, they're going to be gone. Like they're going to be So we get to the airport in Toronto, and all of our stuff is not only still there, but the people at baggage claim took the opportunity to bin all of our stuff and get it checked in for the flight.
Oh, wow.
So not only did we not have to do anything, but it was already like boxed up and ready for us to go. Like we didn't have to do anything. We gave the guy like whatever cash we had. We're like, oh my, like unbelievable. Like this saves everything. So now we just had to do a normal check-in at the regular check-in desk. And then we got there and like, I think it was like 3 or 4. I think 3 groups went at 3 different times, and we ended up getting there like around 1 p.m. But it was just an absolute disaster. And again, nothing like we could have, done about it. It was just the way it was. And I mean, that's obviously worst case scenario on traveling, but it makes for a great story. And I'm happy to tell it on the podcast.
Yeah. So. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate
no problem.
it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. But that's our travel to St. John's. Luckily, we bus most places. We've had to do a sleeper bus a couple of times. We have a normal coach bus, but we had to do a sleeper bus a couple of times where that gets close quartered, but fun. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when I was in college, we had a sleeper bus every trip because we'd going to school in Bowling Green. It would be in Ohio, but we'd play teams in Alabama, Northern Michigan, Minnesota, and it was like customary that the broadcaster, who was like the lowest guy on the totem pole in terms of, hierarchy, would sleep on the floor. I had my designated spot on the floor in the sleeper bus. It was between like the 2 couches in the middle. So our head coach was to the left and our assistant coach was to the right, and I'd sleep right in the middle. It was fine. Like I knew that was my place in college. I had like a yoga mat. I brought pillows. I made it comfortable.
Yeah. So
like our first trip on a sleeper bus when I was here, I was like getting ready to sleep on the floor. I was like, I'm probably, I figured I'm lower at this point.
Yeah.
And then our captain, James Henry, is like, what are you doing? I'm like, sleep on the floor. He goes, staff get bunks. Staff get bunks. So I was like, great. So I went in before everyone else. I picked out the bunk I wanted. It was unbelievable. Nice. And I was like, finally. I felt like I made it at that point.
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was nice for a change of pace to like be off the floor and have like a little curtain thing, a TV in my bunk, which was fine. And it was like a little thing that just made me happy about like, I've come so far from sleeping on the floor of buses to now actually getting my own bunk. But it's rare that we do sleeper buses. We fly a lot for the most part, which thank God Southwest exists. The unofficial official airline of the ECHL, because bags fly free. Big help. But so it's a lot of logistics, but luckily, like I'm working on our travel right now for this upcoming season. So we get ahead of it as quickly as we can. So this way we're not scrambling. If there is a time to scramble, like we have it kind of in the bag already.
You were featured in the NBC documentary on the life and career of Doc Emmerich. Mm-hmm. How influential has he been as a part of your broadcasting career?
It's amazing, to be honest with you, just how you hear about Doc Emmerich, you watch him on TV and call games. It's almost like a figure that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, I've always said that I want to be him when I grow up.
Exactly. Like you never like intend to like, oh, I hope to meet him one day. Like that'll be cool.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was younger, I was at an Islanders Devils game, and for some reason I was like in the suite level, and I remember I walked by Mike Emmerich, and I was like 10 or 11, maybe 12. And I was like, oh my God, I just walked by Doc Emmerich. Like he like walked by me, he was on the phone or something, or he was like doing some recording something. And I was like, that was Mike Emmerich. Like, that was the coolest thing ever. And then when I was at Bowling Green, I mean, he went to Bowling Green. That's where he got the Doc title. Was at Bowling Green. He got his PhD there.
Yep.
And, I've always heard about how great of a guy he is and all this stuff. But again, it's still like a mythical figure to you. Right. It's just like, there's no way, like I've heard all these stories. It's kind of like an urban legend almost. Like I know he exists when I turn on my TV to watch the finals on NBC, but I never, so my senior year coincided with the 50th anniversary of the ice arena at Bowling Green. So I get a text one day from our assistant athletic director at Bowling Green, who I had a pretty good relationship with. And he texted me, hey, I need to talk to you in my office. Which is like never good.
No, never.
It's like,
never
oh no.
Good. Should I bring a box?
Yeah, I was like, okay. I'm still a student at this time, so I was like, I figured like they're doing something, cutting back. I was like, or whatever. Like it was a good run. So I go into his office and he sits me down, and of course there was like a period at the end of the text too. So like I really looked into it, and I was like, oh no, that's the proper grammar in a text message. That can never be good. And so I sit down in his office. And he's like, okay, so for our 50th anniversary, I was like, okay, good. It's not me getting canned or anything like that. He says, we want to bring in some alumni to, be a part of the broadcast since we're going to have a lot of people in the area that day. And we want you to call the game with this guy. So he turns around his computer monitor. Jason Knavel is his name. He thought he was the funniest guy in the world for doing this. Turns around his computer monitor. And it's like a Getty image of Mike Emmerich. And instead of me being like, oh my God, I'm calling a game with Mike Emmerich, the first thing that came to my mind was, Jason, how long have you had that picture on your computer? Turn around, ready for that for? It was something like that. And he goes, damn it. I'm like, what happened? And he's like, I had this room GoPro to catch your reaction. And I was like, sorry, like we could do it again. But like that was like the first thing that came to my mind. Because again, it's like not processing that I'm going to call a game with Mike Emmerich. And then I called my dad after. I was like, yeah, they're going to bring in Mike Emmerich to call a game. And then that's when I was kind of like, whoa. Yeah, Mike Emmerich's I'm going to call a game with Mike Emmerich. And then I think a couple of weeks later, so the game was actually on my birthday. It was on February 11th. And I got a text at like January 17th, just out of nowhere on my phone. It was from a Michigan number. And that's why I know Doc lives in Michigan. He's from Michigan. Yep. He's from Indiana, but now lives in Michigan. Yep. But I thought it was someone on the athletic department, like playing a prank on me. It's like, hi, Evan. Doc Emmerich here. Just getting in touch with you to see if you can go over pronunciations for the game we'll be calling together. He goes, can we talk later today? So I responded like, I didn't want to be like, haha, very funny. But I was like, okay, I'm around today. Why don't you call me? Oh. I didn't like say it like that, but I was like, I like was 89% sure that this was like someone on the athletic department, like playing a prank on me.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, sure. Like you call me. Like I'm around it too. He goes, okay, perfect. I'll call you then. I was like, okay, they're committing a little bit too much to the prank now.
Yeah.
And then like 2 p.m. comes and I get a phone call and I was like, hello. And it's unrecognizably like it's Mike Emmerich, like exactly how you'd say. And he was calling to get pronunciations on a game that was coming up in a month and a half. And I'm like, what is going on? Right. Like I worry about pronunciations like maybe the day before.
Yeah.
Maybe the day of when I see like, oh, I don't know that name. What name is that? Like, but for him to call, and plus like he took off a weekend at NBC to do the game to volunteer to do the game.
Wow.
And like, he's calling me about pronunciations. And I was just like, we talked for like 45 minutes. It was a great conversation. He was like,
yeah.
And he's like, what else would you like to do for the broadcast? I was like, Doc, you can throw me out of the broadcast booth, like, and I'll fall in my head and I'll be like, okay, that's fine. But he's like, it's your show. I'm just along for the ride. You let me know what you need me to do. And it was great. And we called the game together and He was unbelievable. It's actually funny because he did the play-by-play for the second period.
Mhm.
I did the first and third. So it's like really weird. You're doing what you're doing, but to have Mike Emmerich literally right here, you feel like you're under the biggest microscope in the world.
Yeah.
Because like I do this every day, but like I kind of do it to myself. I know people are listening somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually do games by myself, but then I have Mike Emmerich, who's like, everyone wants to be Mike Emmerich and have his approval. And I'm like realizing I'm starting to like, I don't want to mess up. So
Yeah.
I was pretty nervous, but he's like such a calming presence and such a great guy. And then he did the play-by-play for the second period. And once he started, like right after the face-off of the second period, I almost had to take off my headset because I was laughing. Because it was just the absurd, like how absurd this was.
Mhm.
Like it was the only period I ever didn't call at my time at Bowling Green when I was the broadcaster.
Mhm.
And instead of letting like, a student who wanted to do it, like it's Mike Emmerich doing it.
Yeah.
And he's doing it like he would be doing like a broadcast on NBC. Because I have the headset on, I hear him clearly. It's the way, but it's like, it's to see him right here doing that. And me being a part of it was like laughable to me. Like it's just how absurd it was. So it was really cool. And then after that, it was like, what else is going to compare to that? Like, it's unbelievable. And he's such a great guy. He's like, keep in touch, he had nothing but great things to say about me that day. And I was really appreciative of that. He gave me his cell phone number. I had his cell phone number from the text, but his email, he goes, don't be afraid to text me, call me, do whatever you need. So it's funny enough, when the job came open in Glens Falls, I kind of just sent like a prayer email, like, hey, like, you don't happen to know anyone, do you? And he's like, oh, let me see what I can do. And then he sent me an email like 10 minutes later. He goes, I just talked to the president in Glens Falls. He should be reaching out to you. I was like, you called him? So that's what type of person Doc Emmerich is. Like, he doesn't really have to know people, but the fact that he made a phone call, and it was just an ask, like, hey, do you know? He could have very easily just said, hey, I don't know anyone. Thanks for reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, to not only say, oh, I don't know, but hold on, he goes and looks up the number of my now boss, Jeff Mead, calls him, and gives me praise. That's no one in their right mind would ever do that. And I'm very appreciative that he did. And it's just, it's crazy. And it was a great experience I had. It's going to be probably my number one experience ever in the broadcasting world. It's like playing on the same line as Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah,
kind of what it is. And to still be able to talk to him, and we email back and forth, and he's always like around and listening, which is very strange to say, but like, so it was my first year with the Thunder, and we had a playoff game, and I was running around like it was a normal game day, but it was like playoffs, so it was a little crazier. I come back and I see a voicemail on my work phone, which again, he did not have this number. And he left me a voicemail. He's like, hey, Evan, just saw that the Thunder will be playing tonight. Best of luck. Have a great broadcast. I'll be sure to try to tune in and have a great one. And then he ended it with I Ziggy Zumba, which is like a Bowling Green thing. And I was like, what? Like, he knows that we're playing in the playoffs, like, which like the NHL, you don't expect people to be like, oh, the ECHL have their playoffs tonight. The Adirondack Thunder are playing tonight. Like, oh, let me give Evan a call and then leave him a voicemail and wish him good luck. And maybe I'll tune in. It's like, what are you doing? Like, but it's like stuff like that. Like, and you hear the stories all the time of all that stuff. And it's like, there's no way he's actually like this, but he is. He's like the most genuine person in the entire universe, and he'll do anything to help anyone. And it's, I got asked to be a part of the documentary on NBC, which, I mean, I really didn't know exactly what it was going to be. I didn't know how much they needed me for.
Right.
And I ended up being only like about 6 or 7 minutes, but still yeah. And again, they came out with a press release before the thing aired. And it was one of those like absurd, like laughable moments for me. It's like, guests include Wayne Gretzky, Gary Bettman. I forgot who else was on this list. And then at the end, and Evan Pivnick. What? Like, and it was just like one of those moments where you're just like, that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
like you'd
How
be
am I here?
yeah, like, hey, I'm fine with and many more
Yeah.
guests. But then I saw how they all worked it in and it made sense. And they interviewed me for about like an hour and a half about the whole thing. And it was like, they brought the cameras, they brought the lights, and it was, professional. And I was like, this is like big time stuff. And then I watched it and they killed the whole thing. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And just to be a part of that, and, all the texts that I got from that day, just like, oh, I saw you on TV. I was like, yeah, it's weird. It's just weird to me. The whole situation is weird. But again, obviously to be thought of as someone who was, obviously I am someone who has been deeply influenced by the work of Mike Emmerich and also him as a person, like to him to be somewhat of a mentor for me and to think about me in that aspect, not only makes me feel good about myself, but just shows how great of a human he is, that he, not only takes the extra mile, he takes the extra, light years he goes for people. And just to, and also see on that documentary, all the people who had just similar experiences. I mean, it's, and for him to also be not only just a great person, but just be the top of his craft as well. He's like the guy. So it's,
yeah, he's the voice. He is the American voice of ice hockey.
Exactly. Every moment you think of, it's Mike Emmerich calling it. So it's and it's great for him just to be now, either a phone call or a text away, just to pick his brain about something. And he's usually very good on responding. So and if he doesn't, he feels very bad about it, which I so it's great to have that connection with him and still be in contact with him.
I actually have a Mike Emmerich story of my own. The closest I ever came to actually meeting and shaking his hand and talking to him. Back in the day, before I started podcasting, I was actually a chaplain for the Albany River Rats and for the Albany Devils. I served with them for 9 seasons. And then they had the All-Star Breakfast. Hockey Ministry runs an All-Star Breakfast every year at the All-Star Game. And 2009 happened to be in Montreal. So I was like, all right, do an overnight trip to Montreal and take part in a breakfast, and lo and behold, on at the front, the head of the table, the head table, sitting is Mike Emmerich and Chico Resch.
Yeah. On
the one side, I wanted to take some time and say hi and shake his hand and say, I listened to you for so many years. The Devils fan. I'm a New Jersey Devils fan, so I get to listen to him pretty much. That was my 90s soundtrack right there in terms of broadcasting. Was him calling Devils games, whether it be on Sports Channel or Fox, and I never got a chance to say hello or talk to him or just say thank you for all of you've done for American hockey. That's the closest I ever got to meeting him. But I know he's also involved with Hockey Ministries too, so here and there. Yeah. So it's just kind of cool to see. Yeah, like he's an actual good dude.
It's unbelievable too, like the things he'll do to research people. So Mark Benetti, who does my job but with the Rapid City Rush in our league, he told me a story when he was in Fort Wayne on the road with Rapid City, and Mike Emmerich grew up in the Fort Wayne area. He grew up going to games, and they had like a tribute night to Bob Chase, who was the broadcaster there for a long time. Who Mike Emmerich ended up going to shadow and basically got a start from him. And
I think I listened to that game too.
Yeah, he joined. So Mark Benetti was doing the Rapid City broadcast, and in between periods, he kind of looked and saw Mike Emmerich was there, and he's like, "Oh, it'd be great just to shake his hand." So I guess Mark was doing something between periods, and he looked to his left, and waiting over his shoulder to talk to him was Mike Emmerich. Mike Emmerich went over to Mark and talked to, and waited for him to get off the air, and then instead of and Mark was ready to go, "Hi, Mr. Emmerich, I'm Mark," and then Doc goes, Mr. Benetti, so great to meet you. It's what? So he did his research on the opposing broadcaster that he might end up meeting at some point during the game. But it's crazy, and so many people have stories like that where it's just and it's strange. As I said, it's like a mythical figure that you see. It's almost like you hear stories about all of it, and just to see it firsthand and being able to benefit from his kindness and his graciousness is tremendous.
A couple last questions here, and you touched on this earlier in the podcast and in this episode, and just want to ask you again: the Thunder not completing the 2019-2020 season, they elected not to play this season. A lot of teams in the ECHL actually elected not to play this season, but I don't know if you still interact with some of the players or the coaches, but how has how have you, as a broadcaster, and I guess to say the front office, how have you dealt with not having games at the arena? Is it a big void, or how do you feel that? How do you feel that space?
It was surreal when it happened. It was surreal because obviously we never experienced anything like this before in terms of the world shutting down, and we were actually supposed to bus to Brampton that day.
Yeah,
we were supposed to leave at 8 a.m. This was March 12th. So it was funny because I was trying to get tickets because we had like an off night in Brampton. I was trying to get tickets to the Maple Leafs game that night.
Oh, wow.
So I was like asking everyone like, and I actually struck out on tickets. I was like, oh, well. So the game ended up not happening, but we were about to get on the bus. We had our stuff packed on the bus, and then we got like a notice from the league. And it's like, all right, guys, just stay back for a little bit. We're trying to figure out some stuff. Then the bus got pushed to 12, then to 2, and then that point we heard the season got suspended. So at that point it's like, okay, well, we hang out for a couple of weeks now. Like, do we push back the end of the season? Because initially when this whole thing started, it was supposed to be, okay, maybe a month, maybe, everything gets shut down for a month, we're going lockdown, and then everything gets back to normal, which obviously didn't happen. But that was kind of like our thoughts. Okay, maybe do we push the end of the season back? But then you have to get into logistics of like building availability for stuff. So, and then a couple days later, I think, so that was a Thursday, and then Saturday they canceled the rest of our season. So then that Monday we had like all of our exit interviews and stuff for all the players and all the media and stuff like that. So it's just strange because there's like no closure at the end of a season. Usually, it's your last game or you're going to the playoffs, but it was just strange. And then guys kind of were back to square one. And, as the summer went along, we started signing players because we still had that optimism that, maybe in October we get enough capacity to play, and we ended up not getting that. And then the season got pushed to November, then December, then January we were supposed to start. And then we ended up not getting that because even if we did get the okay to play at 50%, because that's what we were looking at for 50% for that season, we would have to factor in the fact that Massachusetts couldn't play, Pennsylvania couldn't play. So what good is it if we're playing, but we have to travel to Ohio every other weekend? That doesn't make sense for us financially. So there are a lot of factors of it. And obviously we didn't get the okay anyway to play at 50%. So it's just strange. And especially it made it tougher for a lot of the guys, especially who were coming out of college ready to play for us this season, because not only are they not going to play with us, but now they have to get a spot playing somewhere in the other 12 teams that actually are playing in the ECHL. So you have all the top line players of other teams like us, the Reading Royals, the Worcester Railers. They all want to play still, all these top line players. So they have to find all these other spots in other teams. So that kind of just bottlenecks everything down. So there are a lot of guys this year coming out of college ready to turn pro that didn't get a chance to do so, or they had to take a year off hockey, and maybe that changed some stuff for them. Maybe it changed their outlook on, I wanted to play a couple years professionally, but now I had to get a job. And it sucks for a lot of those guys. I know Pete MacArthur is a mainstay, he's a household name in the Adirondack Thunder fan base, just the best guy ever. And he was going to play in Orlando, and he ended up getting traded to us right before our season got canceled. And he's, 35, going to be 36 this year. And, that's an older player in our league for sure. But he's coming back this year, as he said. So, wow. For him to do that and then, to stay the course. And I think a lot of guys too are hungry to still prove that they still got it after a crazy year. And I think a lot of teams are also going to basically dismiss last year in terms of what guys did production wise or lack of production, because the opportunities weren't there for a lot of these guys to still showcase that they have talent and they can play. And a lot of the guys, especially as I said before, the college guys turning pro, it's a big step to turn pro. The whole dynamic of everything changes, your lifestyle changes, and they didn't really get the opportunity to do that in a normal season. So hopefully when things get started in October, we'll have a nice big training camp, and it's good because so no matter if we sign the guys this last summer, we still retain their rights for this year.
Yeah.
So they can go play. Say we have guys playing in Indy and Fort Wayne, but still they're under our umbrella. So no matter what, they have to come back to us. So it's still like we signed them. So we didn't really lose anyone except for the veteran guys who you can't retain like that. So but we should have a good contingency of guys back. It should be fun. And I think just the community itself, I think sometimes it goes into any community. I think it gets taken for granted. Not so much here because there have been dark times at the arena here. There's been years where teams haven't played. And I think being without hockey and being without the big to do on a weekend will, I think, hopefully have people wanting to come to games, and kind of like you don't know what you got till it's gone sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And hopefully that sparks maybe people who are on the fence about coming to Thunder games to come to Thunder games this fall, because you now know what it's like to not have hockey games, and you know what impact that takes on local businesses, because we're owned by the coalition, and that is multiple people who own businesses in the Glens Falls area, and it's all people who directly benefit of having, or they benefit from having hockey games, whether it be a restaurant downtown Glens Falls, a store that can be more a little busier because there's a hockey game that night, because there's more traffic in the downtown region or downtown area. So to be without it for a year, and obviously everyone is having a tough time in terms of making any sorts of money, but to have everything back in the swing of things, it's going to be really special to have people in the building on opening night and just have that somewhat level of normalcy back. And again, we there's obviously a light at the end of the tunnel, a big one now, but when opening night comes along, just to have everyone back, you can go out after the game and have a beer at the local place. You can go have dinner before a game, and it kind of just, it's everyone helping everyone.
For those who are trying to get into a career in broadcasting, I have a nephew who is a broadcasting major at St. John Fisher. I myself graduated with a journalism degree last year. I'm the ripe old age of 43 years old, but I'm hopefully looking to get into broadcasting someday as a full-time gig. He's doing the same thing, but I'm just doing this podcast it's kind of a kicking around thing until things come back to normal. But what kind of advice can you share with anyone who wants to get into broadcasting, who wants to just grow their skill set? Can you offer any advice?
My biggest piece of advice is just do it. Just do it. Like, if you have any second thoughts about it, just do it. Because you never know what's going to happen. Like, as I was talking about before, playing video games in my room. That little did I know that me doing that was me getting experience. Me getting an opportunity to broadcast a game, even though it wasn't like for anyone. But just knowing for myself that I can do it, and plus working on things. And also, you have to, one of the biggest things, and it's what I talk to, up and coming broadcasters about, is no one is perfect. You are not perfect. No matter how many people say you are, growing up, because, you have family around and say, oh, you're going to be the next Doc Emmerich. I've heard you call games in your bedroom. I'm like, yeah, but that's you, like, I love you, Grandma, but you know nothing about broadcasting. So I think a lot of times when people hear that over and over again, and they don't really get that to click, like, oh, my parents think I'm good, so I'm good. Like, yeah, but also you can't ride that wave the whole time. So you have to be realistic about your abilities, and you have to be able to not only send out your stuff for critiques, but you have to be able to take that criticism, which is a big thing. Like, when I send out my demo tapes, I send it out to people who, obviously, their opinions I respect tremendously. I'm not sending out my demo tapes just to send out my demo tapes. Like, here's my latest demo tape. It's like not my latest CD I put out. Right. It's like, it's not like you listen to this new hit song I put out. It's like, this is what I want to do in life. And I know whoever I'm sending it to is what I aspire to be. And I obviously respect their opinion. So I want their true opinion, their honest opinion. And if someone goes, oh, it's good, like, that doesn't help me. Right. I want to know where I can be better. And there's so many things that I've learned from talking to so many people. And what I've learned also is that the broadcasting industry, the people, especially hockey broadcasters, they're so gracious with their time because they've been in the situations where, they were in the minor leagues cutting their teeth. They were riding buses at 3 a.m. And, there's question marks. Like, what is it all going to be for at the end? Like, obviously our main goal is to call games in the NHL, but not everyone does that. That's not really what happens. But a lot of people are able to do that. And to be able to send an email to someone and just say, hey, I'm looking to do this. And especially someone in the NHL, like, there are a ton of NHL guys who listen to my tapes because they just reach out and say, hey, I'm in the minor leagues, I'm doing what have done at one point, and they're all like, I know exactly where you're coming from. So and so helped me out when I was at this stage of my life too. So I'm going to pay it forward. It's kind of like that situation. So always send out your stuff, because there's no benefit to you listening back to your stuff over and over again, because you're going to become so complacent with your work. And again, I was like that when I first started too. Like I would listen back to games and I'd be like, oh yeah, that was a good call by me. Like, no, it wasn't. But it was better than what I usually do. But again, that's nowhere near where I wanted to be. And again, from contacting so many different people and having so many people listen, you pick up different pieces of the puzzle that you want to plug in and also, incorporate into your broadcast. And again, also watch and listen to as many broadcasts as you can. The playoffs on NBC is perfect. You have so many different, especially last year when they had all the different broadcasters doing each round, Kenny Albert, Mike Emmerich, John Forsland, Brendan Burke, Alex Faust. And still to this playoffs, it's John Forsland, Kenny Albert, Brendan Burke, Alex Faust, those guys. And they're all so different in their broadcast styles, but they're still at the top of their craft. And those are just, there are things that you pick up like, oh, I like the way he described that. I like the way he used this phrase. I like his cadence or his pace or his pitch and his voice. And there's just so much to learn just sitting down. And, being in broadcasting has ruined like the sports viewing experience for me, just because I'm so in tune with, a broadcast, or if I'm watching a game in person, I could see what's going on the scoreboard. And I know, because I do, the front office stuff here with the Thunder, I know that's a sponsored thing. So I know how they're incorporating different things. I know, spoiler alert, like the noise meter at sporting events, it's going to go to red no matter how loud you are. Yeah. Like that's that sort of stuff. So it kind of takes it out, but I'm also learning and listening and kind of hanging on the words, because I want to be better. I want to learn what I can do differently. Or if someone absolutely crushes a call, I just like, wow, I want to be able to replicate that in some form. So just reaching out to as many people as you can, getting in the reps, no matter how you do it. You don't have to be employed by a team to broadcast a game. As I said before, I used to sit in the corner in Nassau Coliseum and broadcast the game to myself. That's what I did. You can mute the game on TV and call the game to yourself. The information nowadays, you could download the stat packs that the broadcasters use, that the media uses of every NHL game. All the stuff is available for you to put on a broadcast from your home. Especially now, people know how to do it with all the webcam stuff and all the audio stuff. It doesn't even have to be that high quality of it, but doing it over and over again will only make you better. Be open to criticism and be open to anything. Another big thing in broadcasting is you have to relocate. Yeah. Growing up on Long Island, like the number one job that I would want was to be the voice of the Mets or the Islanders. And the New York market is the number one market. Like you're not going to get a job. You're not going to get a major league job out of, just sitting around out of college.
And if you do, you must have the right connections to do that.
Yeah. And if you do, like, unbelievable, like, full marks to you if you do that. That's great. Like, I hope that's I hope that happens to everyone, but it just doesn't. You have the occasional person that slips through every now and again, but you have to learn by going on these new experiences. I went to school in Bowling Green, Ohio. I went to school 9.5 hours away from home. Yeah, because I knew that it would give me the best opportunity to at least try what I want to do. And you have to be open to those opportunities and those experiences. I know people who have moved to Nebraska for a couple of years to do games. And, a lot of the broadcasters of the ECHL are from the New York area, but they're, Mark Manetti, who I said before, is in Rapid City, South Dakota. Jared Shaffrin is in Charleston, South Carolina. You have to be willing to take the necessary steps in order to achieve your goals, and to go into a job with your mindset like that. It's what you need. You can't be looking as much as you want to look big picture. And, there are people who I've met in the broadcasting industry, and, they're like, oh, well, when I'm done with this, I'm just going to get an NHL job, or I'm going to get an AHL job. Like, that's not how it works. And those guys don't have jobs.
Yeah.
right now. That's, I mean, because you have to be able to not only be able to do the work, but be willing to do the work, which is the biggest thing. It's not easy. And I'm not the first person to ever say that, but it's no secret. There are some tough days. There are some tough weekends. It's a grind.
Yeah.
And it's not everyone's cup of tea. But you have to be willing to want to try it, because, it could lead you in the right path, and no one's path is the same. And, a lot of times I'll hear, you went to college and then you got an ECHL job out of college. That's what I want to do. Like, well, you can't that's not like, you can't just rest on that. I got hired out of college, mainly for a sales position. This job was broadcasting and sales. Meanwhile, all the jobs now, it was one of the few jobs that weren't communications director and broadcaster. I got to work for a year under Zach Dooley, who now works for the Los Angeles Kings. He was the communications director here. And then I kind of just watched what he did. And I asked him if he needed any help when he was working here. And then John Edwards got the job after him, who was working in the department. And then ultimately John left. And then me being here for 2 years and working under those guys, I was able to take the position within the organization. But now a lot of teams are looking for the communications aspect of it too. I said in my interview that it's hard to make a salesperson a broadcaster, but easier to make a broadcaster a salesperson, something along those lines. And I guess it got me the job, but but it's so tough now. Especially, I've talked to past couple of weeks of various broadcasters looking for advice and stuff like that. Especially now, it's such a strange time, and every position is looking for communications part of it. And you just have to start where you can get that experience, whether it be an internship. Don't be afraid to do internships. There's nothing wrong about doing an unpaid internship. I
did an internship.
Yeah.
I did 104.5.
Yeah. I did one. I worked at Sirius XM for 2 summers. It was unbelievable. I was fortunate to be a paid intern there, but I would have paid to done that internship.
Yeah.
Because of how valuable that experience was for me and the networking that comes with it. And just being able to work amongst people who are just professionals. That's why, again, paid internships to me are just great. That's a cherry on the top of your whipped cream and all your other toppings on your sundae. But to be able to do an internship and know that, you're not getting paid. It's not about the money. If you're about the money in this profession, then you're in the wrong profession. Yeah. But it's about the drive and the passion for it. You have to be passionate about it. And I know this is a very long-winded response, but there's
quite all right. I'll take all the advice I can get myself.
There's just so many factors and so many things that, and again, when people are applying the jobs, they're presidents and team owners that, they're all looking for a different thing. And especially in minor league sports, it's not always about the broadcasts. And that's a true thing too. I mean, minor league sports, they're there to make money.
Yep. And
if you can't do that, if you're not a revenue generator, or if you don't bring anything else other than calling a game, then you're not going to stick. That's, as much as you want to think, I went to school dreaming about becoming a broadcaster, but learning the reality is, they only care about the broadcast when you get to the companies that are hiring broadcasters, not communications directors, not salespeople. So you have to just be willing to transition yourself to do different things. And I was talking to someone, one of my buddies who's a broadcaster in the ECHL, and we were talking about just the grind of getting a job. And once you do it, and the way our job operates, it's almost like a reward. We get to broadcast the games. It's like, okay, you do all this other stuff and we'll let you broadcast the games. That's kind of what it's like in some aspects. And that's the way I look at it now. It's a privilege to be able to broadcast games. Especially, I'm very fortunate in what we do in Glens Falls is that we're on radio stations. I get to travel home and on the road and do all the games there, not only for our ECHL TV or Flow Hockey TV stuff, but I get to do radio broadcasts. And there are a lot of teams in the ECHL that do online only, but we're fortunate in that aspect. And our fans are passionate enough where they listen and they care. And it's a very unique place to be, where not only do you have the ability to, do games on the radio, but also for people to listen. I'll say things if we're on the road on a Sunday somewhere in the afternoon, I'll say something like, witty, or I'm like by myself. So I'm like basically talking to myself. That's what it is. Like, all right, 2 p.m. We were in a different city last night. Here we go. And I'll just like say like a joke or something that I don't think it's funny. But then like I'll see one of our fans the next week at a game. Like, oh, that was a funny thing you said. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But like, it's one of those things where it's like people listen and people care. And, you know, people ask me like, oh, what's, is so-and-so going to be hurt for a while? Like, I'm going to give them answers. Like, I don't know a lot of the answers, but it's nice to be in a place where people, the fans care, the players care, the coaches care, the management cares. And I think more and more as we, as broadcasting world evolves and the way businesses evolve in terms of minor league sports, it's really nice to see that everyone cares and is passionate.
On that note, I guess we'll wrap things up for this episode of No Credentials Required. Evan, thank you so much for being a part of this week's show.
No
really
problem.
do appreciate it. Hopefully this will lead to a closer relationship with the Adirondack Thunder. I'd love to come to some games this year and take some pictures or do some interviews.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, I'm the guy to contact for that. Most things to contact on the media side is me. So let me know what you need, and we'll get you all set up.
Excellent. And on Twitter, Facebook, just search for Adirondack Thunder. You'll find them there, obviously. Yep. And I'm looking forward to October being back at the cool Insuring Arena at the Glens Falls Civic Center.
Yep.
Just to call it the Glens Falls Civic Center. It's just weird.
I think it was my first. Was it the second year of Cool Insuring Arena? Was my first year.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically I knew it as the Glens Falls Civic Center a little bit, but I was kind of trained right away. It's Cool Insuring Arena. So I never really had to get rid of that habit. But I know a lot of people still like refuse to call it Cool Insuring Arena, which is fine. Like as long as you're going to the right place to watch the game,
exactly,
that's fine. That's fine. It's all good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. I guess I want to remind you, those who are out there who are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Much more episodes coming this way. If you're on the podcast side, listen on any podcast platform, and of course the socials. Twitter is @BellyUpNCR, Facebook.com/BellyUpNCR, and of course YouTube. No credentials required. And again, for Evan, I want to thank my name is Ron McCarthy. I'm your host. Brought to you by Belly Up Sports in association with Godzilla Media. And we'll see you around. Take care.